There are few moments in market history when a small cap biomedical company doesn't just create a product, it redefines a field that medicine long assumed was static. Femasys Inc., listed on NASDAQ under the ticker FEMY, has done precisely that. It's not merely developing devices, it's altering the language of women's healthcare. This episode traces how one company, through a string of disciplined, data-backed decisions, is converting medical orthodoxy into market momentum. For those watching on Shorts, you can find the full uninterrupted version through the link below. Click it to hear the complete story without breaks. Stay with me until the very end, because the final segment contains a detailed trading framework tied directly to both the company's fundamental arc and its latest technical behavior. For more than 70 years, permanent birth control for women has meant surgery. The standard procedure, tubal ligation, requires anesthesia, incisions, and hospital resources. It's costly, carries risk, and requires recovery time. That's the baseline of what's considered normal in gynecology. Femasys disrupted that baseline with a concept so radical that it initially sounded implausible: a permanent, non-surgical, non-hormonal alternative. Its flagship product, FemBlock, uses a catheter to deliver a proprietary polymer into the fallopian tubes during a simple outpatient visit. The material prompts a natural tissue response that seals the tubes without cutting, burning, or removing them. It's a 15-minute procedure. No incision, no anesthesia, no hospital. What makes this so extraordinary is that innovation in reproductive technology almost always favors reversibility, temporary contraceptives that can be undone, not permanent ones that can't. By targeting a permanent incision-free approach, Femasys went against every conventional incentive in its category. That choice alone set the stage for a valuation narrative unlike any other in its peer group. The company didn't stop there. Around FemBlock, Femasys engineered a continuum of devices that covered diagnosis, treatment, and fertility restoration. Femasys introduces sperm directly into the fallopian tubes, offering a far less invasive and far more affordable alternative to in vitro fertilization. FemView replaces the traditional X-ray-based hysterosalpingogram with a saline and air ultrasound test, eliminating exposure to radiation and iodine dyes. In the early stages of medtech, such vertical integration is highly unusual. Most small-cap biomedical firms focus on a single patent or prototype, seeking to sell or license it to a larger player for survival. Femasys did the opposite. It kept control of its entire portfolio. That decision reveals something subtle yet powerful: confidence not only in its science, but in its ability to commercialize it. Investors recognize that as a sign of an execution-focused culture, a rare trait in a sector often defined by dependency on external partners. The timeline of 2025 is where this conviction translated into evidence. On February 25, 2025, Femasys published 5-year follow-up data from its FemBlock clinical trials in a peer-reviewed medical journal. Typically, small medical device companies publish 1 or 2-year safety data and move quickly to market applications. A 5-year data set is an anomaly. It's the kind of longitudinal evidence usually seen from multinational firms with billion-dollar research budgets. The company's data showed sustained safety, high satisfaction among both patients and physicians, and no late-stage complications. This was more than a scientific paper. It was a statement of durability. By proving that its device could stand the test of time, Femasys distinguished itself from competitors who rely on short-term metrics. For the market, that kind of data closes the credibility gap between promise and proof. 4 months later, on June 25, 2025, that proof received official validation. The European Union granted full CE certification under the new MDR, Medical Device Regulation framework for the entire FemBlock system, the delivery device, and the polymer. To understand the gravity of that event, consider how MDR has changed the landscape. Before 2021, under the older MDD rules, companies could secure European approval through less rigorous pathways. But MDR introduced far stricter data, manufacturing, and post-market surveillance requirements. Many small firms failed to meet them. For a $40 million company to achieve full MDR certification, something that normally demands multi-year, multi-million dollar compliance infrastructure, is exceptional. This wasn't just a regulatory checkbox, it was a validation of process discipline. The market interpreted it as a signal that Femasys could play in the same regulatory league as large-cap incumbents without their overhead. Then came August 6, 2025, when the company announced its first European commercial order for FEMBlock, approximately $400,000 from Spanish distributors. That number alone might not sound transformational, but the timing was. Normally, after a CE approval, it takes 6 to 12 months before the first order lands. Hospitals need training, distributors need marketing cycles, and insurers need coding approvals. Femasys compressed that entire adoption curve in just 6 weeks. Such immediacy suggests that interest had been building behind the scenes long before official approval, a sign that clinicians were not just aware of the technology, but ready to deploy it. The anomaly here, the short lag between approval and revenue, implies that Femasys's pre-commercial groundwork was unusually effective. It told investors that the company was not chasing market readiness, it had already achieved it. Less than a month later, on September 8th, 2025, another milestone broke the conventional pattern. Femasys secured regulatory approval for FEMBlock in New Zealand, extending its reach into the Asia-Pacific region. In medtech, international expansion is usually sequential. Europe first, then the Asia-Pacific market 1 or 2 years later, due to separate regulatory dossiers. Femasys compressed that cycle to a matter of weeks. This simultaneity is rare because it requires a globally harmonized documentation process, essentially pre-packaging data for multiple agencies at once. That degree of coordination indicates not opportunism, but foresight. It means Femasys was preparing for global scaling even before the first European approval landed. For investors, this was a quiet revelation. The company wasn't reacting to success. It had engineered success to cascade across regions. And then came the event that defined the company's year, November 3rd, 2025. On that date, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration authorized Femasys to proceed with the final pivotal trial of FEMBlock. In the regulatory sequence of medical devices, the pivotal trial is the decisive moment, the large-scale, multi-site study that determines whether a product can be sold in the United States. Many small-cap biotechs never reach this point. It requires capital stability, manufacturing consistency, and years of accumulated trust with regulators. On that same day, Femasys announced a secured financing arrangement of $12 million, expandable to $58 million upon meeting performance milestones. Normally, early-stage medtech firms raise $3 to $5 million per round, often through dilutive equity offerings. This structured financing was both larger and more flexible, reflecting a lender's confidence in the company's near-term success. The dual announcement, regulatory advancement, and liquidity assurance created a perfect narrative symmetry. The science had matured, and the balance sheet could now support it. Investors reacted instantly. The stock climbed over 30% in a single trading day, closing around $1.04, with more than 15 million shares changing hands. In market terms, that was the sound of skepticism giving way to recognition. Financially, the company's trajectory mirrors that transformation. In 2024, Femasys reported roughly $1.6 million in revenue, up over 50% year over year, while net losses widened to about $19 million. Its market capitalization hovers near $45 million, with 43 million shares outstanding. These figures place it firmly in the developmental stage of medtech valuation, where investors trade on milestones, not margins. The negative earnings per share of 0.85 is not a flaw. It's the cost of building a first-mover advantage. Every dollar of loss in this phase is effectively a down payment on regulatory exclusivity. From a technical standpoint, the stock is now tracing a classic inflection pattern. After spending months below $1, FEMY broke above its 200-day moving average near 95 cents, a textbook signal of long-term trend reversal. The 50-day average, around 53 cents, has crossed above shorter-term averages, forming a bullish convergence structure. The relative strength index remains near 50, indicating balanced momentum with no signs of exhaustion. Key supports sit near 95 and 81 cents, while resistance zones cluster at $1.10 and $1.50, the same levels where prior rallies met overhead supply. Historically, when a microcap with low float breaks through its 200-day line on rising volume, institutional participation often follows. That's the phase where volatility transforms from noise into structured accumulation. However, every inflection point carries risk. The $12 million financing provides operational breathing room but brings dilution exposure since conversion could expand the share count. Likewise, the pivotal trial introduces binary risk. Positive data could reprice the stock dramatically higher, but adverse findings could reverse gains overnight. This is the paradox of early stage medtech investing. Volatility is not a symptom of instability, but the reflection of potential energy. The same mechanisms that make these equities risky also make them lucrative. As of late 2025, Femasys stands on three pillars of strength. First, scientific durability, the rare 5-year dataset confirming that non-surgical permanence can be achieved safely. Second, operational velocity, the ability to achieve multi-region approvals within months, not years. Third, capital adaptability, the structured financing that secures the path to commercialization without catastrophic dilution. Together, these create a composite signal rarely seen in the small-cap medtech sector: innovation, execution, and capitalization moving in sync. For traders, the roadmap is equally clear. In the short term, the $1 to 95-cent zone forms a natural accumulation area. A drop below 81 cents would invalidate the current bullish structure, while a confirmed breakout above $1.20 could trigger an extension toward $1.50. In the medium term, sustained closes above $1.50, especially if paired with new international orders or interim trial updates, could open a path toward $1.80. Long-term investors are, in effect, positioning for an FDA approval event. Should that materialize, Femasys transitions from a speculative narrative to a commercial reality, a transformation that historically multiplies valuations several-fold. If delays or funding pressures occur, however, a pullback toward the 90-cent range would represent equilibrium, a return to fundamental support before the next catalyst. The coherence of Femasys' evolution is what makes this story remarkable. Every step logically builds upon the last. February's long-term data provided scientific grounding. June's European approval proved regulatory sophistication. August's rapid commercial order demonstrated market readiness. September's New Zealand clearance confirmed global scalability. And November's FDA pivotal authorization unified all three dimensions: science, regulation, and capital. In a field where fragmentation is the rule, this sequence displays extraordinary continuity. It's that continuity of purpose, of progress, of narrative that investors find so compelling. The coming year will determine whether Femasys completes its transformation from innovator to incumbent. If the pivotal trial succeeds, it will mark the birth of a new category in reproductive health: permanent, incision-free contraception. That outcome would not only redefine the company's valuation, but set a new precedent for how medical technology, regulation, and investor conviction intersect. Until that verdict arrives, FEMY remains both an opportunity and a mirror, reflecting how markets value courage when science finally aligns with execution. To everyone watching, subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this episode across platforms, thank you. Your engagement keeps this analysis alive, and it pushes us to bring even more comprehensive, higher quality content your way. This was ValueStir.